Hello and welcome to another Pit Stop chat. And today we're going to be talking about social media. And to help me out, I have SQN's very own experts, Carrie and Ben. Carrie, could you just give us a brief introduction to your role at SQN?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie. I am an account manager at SQN. I work across PR and communications for our clients, predominantly in motorsport, automotive, industry, and wider sport as well.
And Ben, could you also give us a brief overview as well?
So I'm Ben. I'm a junior account executive. I newly started at SQN at the start of this year, so came over from Australia, and I specialise in PR and social media.
And it's great to have you both with us. Thank you for taking the time to join me, and I hope I get as much information out of you as possible to help our teams. So the first question, we're going to dive right into it. We all know what social media is, but how important is it for a team to use social media, especially with Greenpower, so Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook? How can that benefit a team?
Social media can really be beneficial for any communication strategy, and it's an important part of what we do with many of our clients. Social media is an important pillar of what we do with them. For Greenpower teams, it can be really important because it can connect you with an audience that you've never had conversations with before. So that might be other participants in the Greenpower community, but equally it can really help you with documenting your journey to then go and showcase to potential sponsors, the media, or even potential employers.
I would say that it's really important, as it's a great way that you can build relationships and showcase key events at times when people can't see it. So creating content and showcasing it, it's the perfect way to keep a circle and people who are interested in what you're up to in the loop.
Social media is also a tool to help people understand who you are before you meet them. And we also have an example of that in the Greenpower community as well with Icarus. How can you kind of mold your image before meeting someone via social media?
You know, I think our colleagues previously talked a lot about branding, and I think it's really important, if you've spent time investing in your brand identity and your reputation, that is also reflected on who you are on social media. So it's really important to use that time that you spent wisely to then decide how that then translates into social media and how you conduct yourselves and what you do on social media.
It's really interesting. Branding almost seems like one of the very first things you should do before you've even built the car, because it filters down into so much elements of the team.
Yeah, it does. And it's important that, you know, once you've decided what that is, that you make sure it's applied consistently across what you do, because that's really what makes a brand identity really strong and makes you stand out as a team from other things. You know, it's that will catch people's eyes.
If you're building a solid foundation through your branding, going forward and approaching sponsors, if they see that, it can really grab their attention and make you look as a team a lot more unique.
And in our sponsorship conversation we had with Stuart and Chris, we mentioned about using different mediums other than just email or letters to try and seek sponsorships. Could you use social media as a way of approaching a potential sponsor?
Absolutely, you could, though it is important to get it right. So make sure that if you are being a bit quirky, you are hitting all the right notes and you're still presenting yourselves in the best way. But if you feel that a tweet to a local company that you think might not respond as quickly to an email or a written letter, then yeah, you should go for social media, because it'll, again, as Ben said before, it makes you stand out from the rest, and it can be really useful, I think, in helping you gain some attention from some sponsors.
Yeah, exactly. And just adding on to that, I think that it's the perfect way to share your thoughts and share your purpose to, you know, companies, for instance, if you're seeking out sponsorship. And it's just the great way to, in this day and age, show your messaging.
Yeah, I think it's really important that if you have, once you have got that sponsor's attention, if they then go and search for your social media platforms, if they say that you've been regularly updating it with content on what you've been doing, new things you've been up to, progress that you've made, then they'll see that, you know, you're really committed to the journey. It's not something you're doing ad hoc and as and when you can. You're actually invested in all parts of what you're doing with the Greenpower Challenge. And I think that part will be really powerful in helping you showcase yourselves to potential sponsors.
So there are so many different types of social media. You have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, I consider a social media as well. How do you determine which social media is right for you? Because I think it's important for a team not to try and do everything.
Absolutely. And I think, as we've said before, it all comes back down to your brand identity. If you have, you know, curated quite a professional outlook, then maybe something like YouTube, where you can really showcase a wide range of skills from, you know, the uploading of video content and creating video content, but also being confident enough to conduct yourselves in the right way on camera might be a good place to start. LinkedIn as well is a really professional platform, normally used by companies to talk to potential clients, but also for, you know, people to network. So I think if you're looking for that sort of more professional platform, those might be the two social media ones you might consider. If maybe you have a more fun or informal personality for your team, then Twitter and Instagram and Facebook might be good places to start for you. But it really comes down to what you want to do on social media, how you want to present yourselves, and maybe just have a little look across each platform to see what the sort of different personality traits of each one of them are before deciding which one's right for you.
Yeah, exactly. Like Carrie said, I'd say you want to test out every platform and give them a try, see what works, see what doesn't, and also what comes back to timings and how much time you do have on your hands. And if you do find that there is a certain social media platform that works best for you, then use it. It's great once you see that, and it does work really well in terms of broadcasting your branding and generating awareness for your team.
Do you find that different content works better on different platforms?
Yeah, I would definitely say it does. I mean, if you look at Facebook as a platform, it's really good because it's so reliable. You can post a broad range of content, whether it be video, photos, or text. Whereas if you're looking at Instagram, photo content, it works best on there. And then Twitter is text, so coming back to sharing thoughts and purpose and desires as a team. But if you look at the full range of platforms, one thing that we notice works really well is movement on posts. So whether you be incorporating video, or one that I feel doesn't get utilized enough is GIFs. So they're basically a combination of a few photos that get formed into a small video. They go a long way as they grab attention and they change things up when people are looking on social media feeds. It also comes to the branding measures that you're taking and being consistent across all the platforms. So making sure you're incorporating your team colors, if you have some, making sure they're the same colors, and posting content that is similar and ties in with the other platforms, giving yourself that sort of style.
How do you manage to make content engaging? I think this is always the biggest challenge. What's your first steps?
I mean, from my side, I think the important thing to remember is every Greenpower team is unique. You all have different stories, so don't shy away from that. People respond really well to other people. So I think it's, don't be afraid to show the human faces behind your team and who you are, while keeping in mind the right tone of voice and your brand identity and reputation.
I totally agree with that. I think it comes to the mindset of how you want to perceive yourself to a certain audience and a certain stakeholder. And yeah, like Carrie said, that it's how you should approach it.
Yeah. I think as well that if you're looking at the sort of specifics of it, a variety of content can work really well across different platforms. So Ben's very well versed in sort of video content for YouTube and Twitter, but equally Instagram's a very visual medium. So it's not all just about doing regular posts with some photos. Maybe you can do some vlogs or even some longer written bits of content. But I definitely think variety is key across all social media.
Yeah, and I think coming back to that, it's the approach that you take for each platform. So, you know, for Facebook and for most companies and brands, that's the main source for where you want to keep your fans, stakeholders in the loop. Whereas Instagram's more for publishing imagery, photos, and keeping them in the loop of actions that are happening that they don't see. And then going to Twitter, it's sharing your personal thoughts, your purpose, and your desires as a team.
And we've kind of started talking about a different couple of audiences there. Is there such a thing as a target audience on social media? Because it's a very public platform.
Absolutely. And I think for different teams, the purpose of being on social media will be different. For some, it might be just documenting for friends and family or the wider school what they're doing with the Greenpower Challenge and the progress that they've made. But much like other companies, some people are talking to, you know, if it's a team, they're talking to their fans. If it's a company, they're trying to talk to potential new customers or clients. So there's always a bit of a balance, and it doesn't mean that you always have to target the same audience, but maybe taking some time when you're putting out a post or a video, whatever it may be, to make sure you know exactly who you're talking to with each post and that you've pitched it correctly.
So when we come to decide what we put on social media, is it always a reactive style of posting, or would you maybe choose a more scheduled, structured approach?
Reactive posts will always have a role to play in social media because there are just some things you can't plan for, and you might find yourselves in a situation where you think this would make a really good post and you should absolutely go ahead and do it. But I think as a way of bringing in the wider team and getting more people involved, then a content calendar can really help you with coming up with ideas to keep your social media populated. And also give you a bit more time. There are things that need longer lead times, such as if you want to do some vlogs or some interviews with members of the team, then you'll need a bit more time. So you'll want to give yourself some content to fill in between while you're creating that as well. And it also gives you the opportunity to maybe get more people involved in the team. Maybe some people aren't so comfortable writing tweets or posts, but they might feel more comfortable doing some longer written pieces or some bits to camera. Equally, not everyone will want to appear on camera, but might feel more comfortable doing some writing or idea generation. So it can be a really fun activity for everyone. And I think a content calendar really helps you bear in mind what things you've got coming up and how you can then build that on your social media.
Yeah, and I'd say also, like, it comes back to team desires, so what you intend to do and how much time you have on your hands. But I mean, like Carrie said, consistent content, it can be taken in small measures, but can go a long way.
And from personal experience, if you're trying to manage a social media account, it can be quite taxing for a sole individual to do. Branding, we mentioned it could be a good idea to get everyone involved. Is social media something that could be shared amongst members of the team?
I would say so, yes. I think the thing to bear in mind is even with our favourite brands or motorsport teams, their social media is not managed by one person. There's a team of people working on it. And as you said, if one person's looking out after it, it's very time consuming. It can be very draining. And that's when you start to lose the fun and maybe the purpose of the social media. So that's why it's really useful if more people are involved and the responsibility is shared, either on a rotation or if maybe there's an adult that's responsible for the upload, but everyone's responsible for actually creating the content. If it's left to one person, I can very easily see them starting to not enjoy it, which shouldn't be the case. It should be something that you think is enhancing what you're doing. And I think it's a useful practice for everyone to approach social media from the point of view of professionalism, because there are a lot of jobs nowadays where social media is key, not just for the actual brand social media, but for us, we're also representing our companies on social media when we're not even working. So it's useful to understand how best to conduct yourself online.
And what a tick in the CV to say that you managed the social media account of a Greenpower team when looking for a job in this area. But although it's fun and it gives people a head start when looking for jobs, how do you protect participants when using social media for Greenpower?
The thing to remember, of course, is that while we all have our own personal social media accounts, maybe it can be very different when you're doing it from the point of view of a company or a brand, and that should definitely be the way that Greenpower teams approach it, is making sure at all times that what they're doing is responsible on social media, and bearing in mind that a lot of the platforms won't let you have an account until you've reached a certain age. So for example, Facebook and Instagram, you have to be 13 years old before you can have your own account. So I would definitely say for those of you who are maybe in schools that you should always have a responsible adult helping you out with social media.
And the thing is, it's important not to shy away from that fact as well. It's especially with the gobbling category as well. It's okay having the participants engaging with taking pictures or taking video, but you need to be very mindful of, maybe getting parents' permission, especially if you're showing other children, and maybe restricting their access to social media as well.
Absolutely.
And that also falls back on the being responsible as well, doesn't it? Especially with your outer image.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen, especially in lockdown, that a few people have been caught out by not quite conducting themselves properly online. And I think it's something we should all bear in mind, that nothing ever disappears on the internet. It's always somewhere for someone to find. So maybe to think twice about how we phrase things before we send that post out, just because you want to make sure you're always giving the best impression of yourself at all times.
Exactly. It comes back to building that reputation, and also you need to realize that your team, or majority of the other teams, are part of institutions, so it's almost applying school rules but on a virtual space.
Absolutely. You're not just representing yourselves, you're representing your schools, your colleges, your youth groups, your universities, and even your sponsors as well. So you want to make sure that you're really doing justice to yourself and making sure that you come across as professional at all times.
Yeah, because even in F1 and other major corporate brands, they can be seen to be using social media to maybe playfully tease with each other. And I think it's important that although if you have a good reputation, you can sometimes get away with it, it does always damage your reputation, even if it's just slightly, and then you have to start building that back up again.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's a lot easier for those larger companies because they have legal backing in the background and people who are constantly looking at every individual post, comment, reply and piece of content that's going out there. Whereas with a small team, you don't have that sort of safety net. So it's one thing to definitely be careful of.
And it is okay to have fun, but I think the main takeaway from this is you have to make sure that whatever you say is still playful from an outsider's point of view, someone who doesn't know the teams or personalities involved. And I think as long as you have that mentality, it is a safe space to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think when you go, as you said, go and look at what these F1 teams are doing with their teasing and their banter, you'll actually find there is a great level of respect between all the participants, and it never really verges away from that. So always be mindful of, there's always someone else on the other end of that post. So just being mindful that you're not being hurtful.
So social media is a live forum. What should someone do if they think they have made a mistake when making a post?
I would say first things first is to take it down off whatever platform you're using. So make sure that it is not visible anymore. And if you are a minor, seek out help from a responsible adult. And it never hurts to seek out help from anyone. But yeah, definitely get advice from someone else. If it's to do directly with someone else involved with the situation, make sure you do follow up and get in contact with them, and just check that everything's okay.
And if you're inexperienced or you're new to this, it doesn't hurt to ask before making a post either. So, there's always steps you can put in place to make sure you feel comfortable with what you're posting.
Yeah, I mean, a second set of eyes never hurts, and it goes a long way.
And then that goes back to bringing the whole team into it, and it's not just the responsibility of a sole person. Everyone in a team is responsible for the team's identity.
Exactly, yeah.
And social media is very difficult to get right, but if you're approaching it from a group point of view, then that can only help just to make sure that you're on the right path and you're still doing, you're still following your core purpose.
Are there any good examples that you think teams should go and look at before they look at starting this journey?
I think go and have a research at your favorite team, maybe your football team, motorsport team, cycling, tennis player. Go and have a look at what they're doing on social media, because it will be different. You might find that, your Roger Federers are quite corporate, they're very professional and sleek, whereas Andy Murray, for example, is very informal, quite tongue-in-cheek. Then you have companies like Mercedes F1 who really sort of found this balance between tongue-in-cheek, but also they obviously have a lot of sponsorship obligations and corporate obligations where they have to present themselves in a certain way, but they really balance this tongue-in-cheek and corporate professional outlook on their social media. Those are just a few examples, but go and have a look at what your favorite brands are doing, and understand the differences and the different ways that that they are different from each other, and use that as a starting point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go and look at the top companies around the world and the top sporting teams or whatever you have a strong interest in, a lot of these companies do have just a designated social media team. So the content that they're producing is extremely professional. And if you guys as a team can work out a way that you can almost mimic or copy a few of their ideas, techniques, strategies, then it can honestly pay dividends and go a long way.
What kind of jobs are actually around social media? That's something that we didn't discuss previously.
I mean, where do you start? Every company, every organization has social media, because much like we said at the start, it helps you communicate with your wider audiences in a way that you didn't have access to before social media. So there are lots of, I think people might be surprised to hear this, but especially in STEM, there are a lot of social media jobs and communications jobs and PR, because these companies still need to communicate what they're doing. A bit like Greenpower teams, if someone makes a really cool engineering product, the engineers still need to be able to go and present that to their maybe the board of their company, who then have to go and present it to potential sponsors so they can get more money to produce this on a wider scale. And social media and communications can play a huge role in that. So having this as a sort of basis, as a foundation, can while you might not want to go into a social media role, it can really bring you a lot of transferable skills, I would say.
And there's so many good news stories that can come from social media, but I think it's an important question to ask. How does a team decide if social media is right for them?
It won't be right for everyone, but I think it comes down to who you want to talk to. If you're finding maybe that your sponsorship outreach isn't going quite as well as you'd like, or that not enough people in your school or your wider community are aware of what you're doing, and you're just wanting to build that awareness of your Greenpower team, then it can be a really useful tool for you. But others may feel that it's not appropriate for them, and that the measures they're using already are doing the job for them. But I think it's a useful exercise if you want to build more awareness around what you're doing and who you are.
And I'd also say that a great thing to do is sit down as a team and ask everyone the question of why and for what reasons do you want to use social media, and what do you want to achieve out of it. So setting a few little goals to reach, and if you have the answer for that, then it becomes a lot easier taking the next steps going forward and creating content and ways that you can utilize social media.
And it's just being aware, this is a massive project. You've got an electric car to build as your first port of call. And this, although it can be very important, is something that you don't need to do. So it might just be more beneficial to, say, use the school's social media account to get your posts out rather than doing something unique to yourself. So I'm going to very briefly try and wrap up everything that we've discussed. And if there's anything I've missed, please let me know. But essentially, social media is a really powerful tool in a wider space than what you'd be able to reach in person. And that's the whole strength of social media. It gives you an identity before someone's even met you. And that can be really important when talking to sponsors. And don't be afraid about engaging with big corporate brands. It can be fun, and it can lead to maybe your team getting some support. You do have to be wary, though. Always be responsible for the posts that you make. And I think one of the general rules that I've always lived by is that don't say anything on social media that you wouldn't say in person. And if you are having a laugh or making a joke with someone, make sure that it still comes across as playful from the outside. It can be a team activity. There's no reason for one person to be stuck with this job. If they enjoy it, then that's brilliant, but they need to make sure they do enjoy it. And if they start to find it's no longer fun, maybe start looking at pulling back from how much you're engaged with, and just make sure that everyone is enjoying the Greenpower experience. And I think that's pretty much the general rules of social media there. Have I missed anything that's really important and obvious?
No, I think that sums it up really nicely.
Yeah, and I mean, if anyone out there, any team needs help and is seeking out any advice, then don't hesitate in contacting us. We can always help, whether it be providing templates for social media content schedules, whatever it may be, just a question, just don't hesitate and ask.
And just to remind me, I'm going to get the email address wrong. So what was the email address that teams can use?
It's greenpower@sqn.agency.
Brilliant. So anyone in the Greenpower community, don't be afraid to get in touch with these guys. As I hope these videos have proved, they're really friendly and fun to talk to. Thank you both. I hope that's been enjoyable from your part, and really appreciate you spending the time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Much.